Right, next up, Head of Member Services at CHIC, it's Sarah Degg, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I've achieved my only goal of the day, not to fall over as I walked up in these heels. So, today I'm going to be talking to you about using data intelligently. We know that in the social housing sector, it's extremely data rich, but are we actually analysing it and then utilising that to have operational efficiencies driving us forward? To give you a bit of background on me, I haven't had just the standard staying in a social housing sector. I've worked in retail as well. So I finished university and went straight into retail as an analyst there. I then moved into a local authority in-house contractor where I was a business development manager. I then decided to move down to London and worked as an operational analyst at high-end retail. I then moved to CHIC. But one thing I can say throughout the whole of my career so far is how much data really drives operational efficiencies. We really need to be understanding the data and using it to move forward with our services. So I want to give you an example. In retail, this was a genuine example of what actually happened with the data. So the problem was monitoring productivity of personal shoppers effectively. So first of all, this high-end retailer had far too many reports. A manager on a Monday morning would be pulling off these reports individually, printing them out, and then cross-referencing a personal shopper on each one. Now, there's two problems here. The first problem being the fact that it took them a long time. The second problem is looking at a personal shopper's performance in isolation isn't giving you a true reflection on how they're actually performing over a long period. So, what did we do? We created one live report. So we brought all those reports together and made a live connection. So it meant that the manager could now go into the data and see it in an instance, and it would be up to date. So you could understand how the personal shopper was doing. However, I still couldn't present this to a manager. He wouldn't understand this. This data hasn't been analysed. So what did we do? We created a staff performance dashboard, which gave an overall rating out of 5 for each personal shopper. This meant we had targets now based on hours worked. So some of these personal shoppers were part-time, not full-time, and they needed a target which was how many hours they were working. We had target feedback percentage. For in retail, you really need to understand the engagement you're having with your customers. So for this, we had a percentage. And target appointments. So from the data that we had, we can now work out, on average, how many appointments were needed to achieve the overall sales, to hit that overall target. So we've analysed the data. What did this do? Well, it helped us to move forward. 5 people were retrained. It was quite evident to see from the data that actually 5 people were doing really well with the customer service aspect, but in terms of actually getting the sales, they weren't achieving the targets. And it was just because they didn't have enough experience in upselling, so they were retrained. 2 people were removed from the programme because now that manager could see over a long period of time actually how their performance had been dipping and just wasn't achieving what this is needed. We could also celebrate success. So lots of people think data is quite negative in the fact that it will show where you're doing something wrong. But actually data can also show exactly where you're doing something right and share best practice then. That's exactly what they did in this retail. Overall, sales increased by 8% after the first month. And that was purely because these personal shoppers now had a target that was down to them and they could understand and they could see themselves how well they were doing. So, let's bring it back to social housing. Now, I'm going to see if you're all awake because I'm going to test you all now. So, thanks to my lovely friends at ARC, they've provided me with some data. What do you think the average number of responsive repairs per property per year are? If we go, raise your hands if you think it's below 3. Okay? Now, if you think it's above 3. Okay, so a lot more for above 3. Overall, the average is 2.77. But as you can see, there is a massive range. So it shows that some properties can have 0 repairs in a year. Other properties could potentially have 1 every 2 weeks. Now, we only know this because, again, we've taken that data and we've analysed it and can really reflect on it. So if I was to ask you now, do you know what your average repair is per property per year? Could you tell me that quickly and straight away? Or actually, are you just collecting that data and not actually understanding it or analysing it? Let's go again. Number of repairs by age range. Let's go below 50? Raise your hand if you think that's got the highest one. Raise your hand if you think it's above 50. So you're most demanding on my age range, the younger generation, as you can see. So does that mean that actually, as we move further along, that repairs aren't going to drop? That capital investment that we're putting into the housing stock isn't going to do it, because my generation are a lot more demanding. They want a lot more things. We need to understand that from the data. So who thinks, out of these two age ranges, the younger and the older generation, who wants more contact with the social housing provider? Who thinks that's much more of a priority? Let's go 18 to 35s first, raise your hand. Okay, let's go over 65s. Okay, you are all correct. So from this data, we need to understand, how are we communicating with them effectively? For the over 65s, do they want more contact because they aren't getting the updates on social media that the younger generation are maybe seeing, that they don't actually need to have that phone contact? But over 65s might prefer a letter, they might prefer human contact, or just being able to nip in to see you. This is again where you delve into the data and analyse it. So again, residents' priority in ensuring their home is safe. Who thinks 18 to 35-year-olds have had this as more of a priority? And who thinks over 65s? Yes, correct. Both extremely high, but yeah, over 65s have. Now, as social housing providers and local authorities, are we making sure we're communicating to those over 65s? Actually, our priority is also their priority. So we're ensuring their homes are safe. Are we getting that out there? Do they understand that that's also just as important it is to us as it is to them? So I've told you a lot there. Now, most of our ISAP models, after Adrian spoke about it, have 60 data sets. I've given you 3. That's it. So imagine how much more we could get out of this, and we can use it to drive forward and understand how our service is. So if I was to ask you now, how well do you think you use data? Are you actually using that data to tailor your service? Are you understanding how your customers, your tenants, want to be communicated to, so you get the best possible engagement? Now for CHIC, we use data to support our members. So on the screen you can see this is a capital spend through our merchants, and we can then cross-reference that against the CPI and RPI savings that we make. Again, it's only because we're collecting that data and being able to present it back to you. Thank you for listening.
I do love a quiz. I did really badly. Thank you very much. Next up.